I think that you can go farther than that, but we'll get to that because what we've seen here is that the Roman Empire over time ceased to be Roman. And this is normal, just so you understand. This is normal for all empires. If you look at the Chinese empires, how many of them were actually Chinese? You know, a number of them, when they talk about the Indian empires, you have the Mughals who, I'm not pronouncing it correctly, but they were essentially Mongol imports. The Chinese had also had Mongolian emperors, and then they had the later dynasty that also wasn't Chinese. And so what we're seeing is that, first of all, the U.S. is an empire. The U.S. has been an empire established by force, ruling over a separate nations, at least since 1865. The Civil War marked the end of the Republic. People just didn't really realize it or recognize it because they maintained the trappings of the Republic that preceded it. But it was no longer a voluntary association. Jacob says, "Hey Vox, thanks for helping me challenge my assumptions and helping me find Christ again. I know you're non-denominational, but I'm curious on your thoughts on the Orthodox versus the Protestant Church. First, I'm glad to hear that. Secondly, I don't really have any thoughts on that. I spend no time whatsoever thinking about the Orthodox Church, and I spend virtually no time thinking about Protestant denominations. Not an area of interest to me at all." So anyhow, when you look, the Manchu, that was the word I was looking for, the Manchu dynasty in China. And so it's important to keep in mind that, now see, Mark is missing the point. 1868, it went commie. It's not about ideology. Ideology has virtually nothing to do with it. Ideology is what separates a nation. Ideology involves the competing ideas, the competing abstract ideas that separate a nation. But we're not talking about a nation. The United States is not a nation. The United States is and has been for over a century an empire. And the fact that that empire became the most powerful empire on earth meant the same thing that happens in every empire. People are naturally drawn to power. And evil people are particularly drawn to power. And so it's normal that people will be drawn to it and then attempt to rise up in it and then attempt to utilize it for either their personal goals or for their to further the interests of their identity group. This is normal. This is what has happened over and over and over and over again. And so when you look at the way that the United States occupies Europe, Western Europe, it literally occupies Western Europe. Troops all over Germany, troops and bases all the way down through Italy. When you look at this, it's natural that different identity groups are going to attempt to utilize that power for their own benefit. Now, keep in mind that Israel did not do that when it was first founded. Many people don't realize that it was actually the Soviet Union that was providing Israel with most of its military goods and so forth. And because of the nature of its founding, Israel was in a modest form of war with the UK. In fact, I met a older British gentleman at an Anglican church in Europe, and he hated Israel. I mean, I don't think I'd ever met anyone who hated Israel specifically as much as this guy. And I asked him, why? And he said, my brother was killed by the Irgun, one of the Jewish terrorist gangs of before the establishment of the State of Israel, which later ended up becoming the roots of the Likud political party there. I think Menachem Begin was one of them, if I recall correctly. And because the British used to control that land, the whatever it was called, it was actually called the province of Palestine or whatever it was. And so these things are much more complicated and intertwined than a simple oh, you hate X because you're bigoted against Y. That's a remarkably foolish and ignorant way to